corporate corridors whisper her name with pure terror. Victoria Sterling, a billionaire who once fired an executive on his wedding day. But when a desperate single dad smuggled his severely ill daughter into the boardroom, this ruthless CEO did something that shattered every rumor. She locked the door. David Harris stared at the glowing numbers on his alarm clock. 4:15 a.m. He hadn't slept. Beside him, in the cramped apartment they shared in Queens, his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, was tossing restlessly, her breathing accompanied by a faint, terrifying wheeze. Today was not the day for a crisis. For a single father teetering on the edge of financial ruin, there was never a good day, but today was catastrophic. David was the lead financial analyst at Sterling Vanguard Media, a ruthless Manhattan conglomerate currently orchestrating a multi-billion-dollar merger with Omnicorp. If the deal went through, his commission would finally pay off the crushing medical debt left behind by his late wife's battle with cancer. If he fumbled, he would be out on the street. At 6:30 a.m., David made the agonizing decision. He gave Lily her nebulizer treatment, packed her a lunchbox of soft foods, and called his reliable babysitter, Mrs. Diggins. Ring, win, ring, ring, ring. David, I'm so sorry. The elderly woman's voice cracked over the receiver. I'm at Bellevue Hospital. My husband had a stroke an hour ago. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced David's chest. Oh my God, Martha, don't worry about us. Just take care of him. I'll figure it out. He hung up, his hands shaking. He scrolled through his contacts. No family in the state. Friends from his old life had drifted away after his wife died. He looked at Lily, and was wrapped in a fleece blanket on the sofa, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She looked pale, her cheeks flushed with the beginnings of a fever, but her breathing had stabilized. Daddy? She rasped. Am I staying home? No, sweetie, David said, his voice tight. You're coming to work with me. Bringing a child to Sterling Vanguard Media was tantamount to professional suicide. The company was ruled with an iron fist by Victoria Sterling, a 34-year-old self-made billionaire whose icy demeanor had earned her the moniker the Glacier. Victoria had zero tolerance for personal baggage. She expected absolute devotion to the firm. Only last month, David had watched her terminate a senior vice president for taking unauthorized leave during a major acquisition. By 8 a.m., David had successfully smuggled Lily through the underground parking garage. He bypassed the main lobby and security scanners, using his senior access card to bring her up the freight elevator to the 54th floor. He tucked her away in the deep archives rumor windowless, climate-controlled vault at the end of the hallway that held decade-old physical contracts no one ever looked at. He set up a makeshift bed using his heavy winter coat and a few oversized legal boxes. He handed her his iPad, preloaded with her favorite cartoons, and a thermos of warm tea. You have to be completely quiet, Lily, David whispered, kissing her forehead. Her skin was far too warm. Daddy has a massive presentation at 2 o'clock. I'll come check on you every hour. If you need me, hit the big red button on my old phone. It calls me directly. Do you understand? Lily nodded weakly, her eyes already drooping. I promise, Daddy. The morning was a blur of high-stakes negotiations and financial modeling. David's rival, James Rutherford, a slick Ivy League graduate who wanted the lead analyst spot, was watching him like a hawk. Every time David slipped away to the archives, James's eyes followed him. At 11:30 a.m., David checked on Lily. She was asleep, but her breathing was shallow. He wiped her brow with a damp paper towel from the break room. He told himself she just needed rest. He couldn't afford an emergency room visit right now, not just the money, but the time. The Omnicorp executives were arriving in 2 hours. At 1:45 p.m., the executive boardroom began to fill. The mahogany table stretched 20 feet, lined with men and women in bespoke suits. At the head of the table sat Victoria Sterling. She wore a pristine white blazer, her dark hair pulled back into a severe chignon, her emerald eyes scanning the room with terrifying calculation. David took his seat to her right, opening his laptop. His phone was resting on the table, face down. "Let's begin." Victoria's voice cut through the room like a diamond cutter. "Mr. Harris, I expect your valuation models to justify the $3 billion asking price. Walk us through it." David stood up, clicking the projector remote. "Thank you, Miss Sterling." If you look at slide 4, he was 10 minutes into the presentation, nailing every metric when his phone vibrated against the mahogany. It sounded like a jackhammer in the silent room. Victoria's eyes darted to the device. "Is there a problem, David?" "No, ma'am." "Apologies," David said, swallowing hard. He ignored it. 30 seconds later it vibrated again, and again, and again. James Rutherford smirked from across the table. "Seems like Harris has more pressing matters than a billion-dollar merger." David's heart hammered against his ribs. It was the emergency phone. "Lily." "Turn it off," Victoria commanded softly, a warning tone that usually preceded a firing. David reached for the phone, intending to power it down, but the screen flashed a text message before he could stop himself from looking. It was from Lily. "Daddy. Can't breathe. Scared." The color drained completely from David's face. The room, the merger, the billionaire CEO, it all dissolved into white noise. Without a word, he dropped the presentation remote. It clattered loudly onto the table. "David." Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. "What are you doing?" "I have to go," David gasped, grabbing his phone. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and sprinted out of the boardroom, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. David practically tore the door off the archive room. "Lily," he cried, dropping to his knees. The sight made his blood run cold. Lily was curled in a fetal position on top of his coat, gasping for air. Her lips had a terrifying blue tint, and her chest was heaving with an agonizing retraction effort. It wasn't just a fever, it was a full-blown, severe asthmatic crisis triggered by a rapidly progressing respiratory infection. "Daddy's here, baby, Daddy's here," he panicked, fumbling for her emergency inhaler in her backpack. His hands were shaking so violently he dropped it. He scrambled in the dust of the archive floor, found it, and pressed it to her lips. "Breathe, Lily. Deep breath. Come on, sweetie, please." The medicine did nothing. Her airway was swelling shut. David pulled her tiny limp body against his chest, tears streaming down his face. "I'm calling 911, just hold on." "What the hell is going on here?" The voice was pure ice. David froze. Standing in the doorway of the dim archive room was Victoria Sterling. Her arms were crossed, her designer heels planted firmly on the linoleum. Behind her, James Rutherford was peering over her shoulder, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Well, well," James sneered. "Running a daycare on company time, Harris?" "Miss Sterling, this is a severe breach of security protocol." "I told you he was unreliable." David pulled Lily tighter against him, looking up at the billionaire CEO. He knew it was over. His career, his financial stability, his life. "Miss Sterling, I can explain," David choked out, tears openly falling now. "My sitter had a medical emergency. I couldn't leave her alone. I'm sorry. Fire me, sue me, do whatever you want, but please, I need an ambulance." "She can't breathe." Victoria stepped fully into the room. The cold, calculating mask she wore for the world seemed to freeze completely. She stared at the blue-lipped child in David's arms. James scoffed. "Call security, Victoria. Have them escorted out. I can take over the Omnicorp presentation right now." "Shut your mouth, James," Victoria snapped. The sheer ferocity in her voice made James physically recoil. Before David could comprehend what was happening, the billionaire CEO dropped to her knees right beside him on the dusty floor. The pristine white blazer was instantly soiled, but she didn't even blink. She reached out, her hands surprisingly gentle, and felt the side of Lily's neck. "Her pulse is racing and she's cyanotic," Victoria said, her voice entirely stripped of its usual corporate edge. It was urgent, focused, and terrifyingly calm. She looked David dead in the eye. "How long has she been struggling?" She was fine an hour ago. David stammered, shocked by the CEO's sudden proximity. I gave her the inhaler. It's not working. Victoria pulled a sleek black phone from her pocket and dialed a number, bypassing 911 entirely. Dr. Reed. There's a bun. It's Victoria. I need a pediatric trauma team at my office building immediately. Bring a mobile oxygen unit, epinephrine, and a crash cart. 54th floor. I'll have security clear the freight elevators. She hung up and looked over her shoulder at a pale James Rutherford. James, she barked. Go to the boardroom. Tell Omnicorp the meeting is suspended until tomorrow. Then go to security and tell them if the paramedics are delayed by even 1 second at the lobby, I will fire everyone in this building. Move. James stumbled backward and sprinted down the hall. Victoria turned back to David. An ambulance will take too long in midtown traffic. My private physician, Harrison Reed, is at Mount Sinai. He has a helipad and a mobile response unit. He's 3 minutes away. David was sobbing now, rocking Millie. Why are you doing this? Because she's suffocating, David, Victoria said softly, pulling off her white blazer. She rolled it into a firm cylinder and gently slid it under Lily's shoulders, opening her airway further. Tilt her head back. Keep her chin up. Talk to her. Keep her conscious. And Sora Alpha for our Lily, stay with me, David pleaded, stroking his daughter's damp hair. Ms. Sterling is helping us. You're going to be okay. Victoria unbuttoned the cuffs of her silk blouse and rolled up her sleeves. Call me Victoria. For the next agonizing 3 minutes, the billionaire CEO of Sterling Vanguard Media sat in the dust of a forgotten storage room, holding the hand of a junior analyst's dying child. She monitored Lily's pulse, whispering calm, soothing words into the little girl's ear. A stark contrast to the tyrant who had ruled the boardroom just minutes prior. Suddenly, the heavy doors at the end of the hall burst open. A team of 3 medics, led by a tall man in a tailored suit and a medical bag doctor, Harrison Reed, sprinted down the corridor. Victoria. Dr. Reed called out, sliding into the room. He took one look at Lily and immediately opened his bag. Severe anaphylactic or asthmatic shock. Let's get oxygen on her now. Prep the epi. David was pushed back as the medical team swarmed his daughter. An oxygen mask was strapped to her face and an injection was administered to her thigh. David slumped against the wall, burying his face in his hands, trembling uncontrollably. A warm hand touched his shoulder. He looked up to see Victoria standing over him. Her silk shirt was wrinkled, her knees covered in dust. We're taking her to the Mount Sinai private wing, Victoria said firmly. My car is waiting in the basement. You're riding with me. The Omnicorp deal, David whispered, his brain short-circuiting from the trauma. Victoria's eyes flashed with a hint of her trademark steel, but this time it was protective. Omnicorp can wait. Right now your only job is being a father. Come on. The black Maybach tore through the gridlocked streets of Manhattan, escorted by a private security SUV with flashing strobes that parted the sea of yellow cabs. In the spacious backseat, David held Lily's oxygen mask in place, his eyes glued to the steady rise and fall of her chest. Dr. Harrison Reed sat opposite them, continuously monitoring her vitals on a portable tablet. Beside David sat Victoria Sterling, the billionaire CEO, whose time was famously valued at $10,000 a minute, sat in total silence. Her tailored white blazer was ruined, her silk blouse stained with dust and grime, but she didn't seem to notice. Her emerald eyes were fixed entirely on the little girl. We are approaching the Kravis Children's Hospital at Mount Sinai, Doctor, Reed announced, his voice steady. They have the pediatric intensive care unit prepped. We'll bypass the ER entirely. Good, Victoria said crisply. Whatever they need, authorize it. Bill my personal accounts. David looked at her, his throat tight. "Victoria, you don't have to. I said your only job was to be a father right now, David," she interrupted, though the harshness usually present in her tone was entirely absent. "Let me handle the logistics." As soon as the car pulled into the private ambulance bay, a swarm of nurses and a pediatric pulmonologist were waiting. They whisked Lily onto a gurney, and the chaotic blur of the hospital took over. David tried to follow them through the swinging double doors of the ICU, but a gentle nurse held him back. "We need to stabilize her airway and run a chest X-ray, Mr. Harris," the nurse said sympathetically. "Please wait in the private family lounge. Dr. Reed will update you the second we know more." Defeated, David sank into a plush leather chair in the empty, dimly lit waiting room. The adrenaline that had fueled him for the past hour suddenly evaporated, leaving behind a crushing wave of exhaustion and terror. He buried his face in his hands, silently praying. He had already lost his wife in a hospital room very much like this one. He could not lose his daughter. 20 minutes later, the door clicked open. David jumped up, expecting a doctor. Instead, Victoria walked in. She was holding 2 steaming cups of coffee from the cafeteria downstairs. "Black, 2 sugars," she said, handing him a cup. "I remembered your coffee order from the morning briefings." David took the cup, his hands still trembling slightly. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Drink your coffee, David," she ordered softly, sitting down in the chair across from him. The silence stretched between them, heavy but strangely comforting. David looked at the woman who was notoriously dubbed the Glacier by Wall Street. Up close, stripped of her corporate armor, she looked remarkably human. There were faint circles under her eyes, and the severe bun she usually wore had loosened, letting dark strands of hair frame her face. "I expected you to go back to the office," David admitted quietly. "The Omnicorp deal is the biggest acquisition in the company's history. Richard Gable isn't known for his patience." Victoria took a slow sip of her coffee. "Richard Gable is a ruthless old shark who cares only about bottom lines. But if a $3 billion merger hinges on me letting a 7-year-old girl suffocate in my building, then Omnicorp can take their business to hell." Before David could process the magnitude of that statement, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was a text message from James Rutherford. "You really screwed the pooch this time, Harris. Gable's reps are furious. I stepped in and salvaged the preliminary numbers. Have fun at the hospital. Clear out your desk by Monday." David stared at the screen, a sick feeling settling in his stomach. It didn't matter that his daughter was fighting for her life. Corporate vultures never slept. Victoria noticed his expression change. "What is it?" "It's James," David sighed, rubbing his temples. "He's taking over the lead analyst spot. Says the Omnicorp reps are furious." Victoria's eyes narrowed. A dangerous, icy spark ignited in them. "Give me your phone." "Victoria, it's fine." "He's right. I abandoned my post. Give me the phone, David." He handed it over. Victoria didn't text back. She hit the call button and put the phone on speaker, resting it on the low coffee table between them. It rang twice before James answered, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Well, if it isn't Father of the Year," James sneered. "Did you call to beg for a severance package?" "Hello, James," Victoria said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Miss Sterling, I thought this was David's phone. Are you still at the hospital?" "I am," Victoria replied. "I'm curious, James. You mentioned to David that you salvaged the preliminary numbers for the Omnicorp reps. Did you present my customized valuation matrix?" "Yes, ma'am." I stepped up immediately," James said, his confidence returning, clearly thinking he was being praised. "I made sure they knew Vanguard was still operating at full capacity despite Harris's little domestic meltdown. I practically secured the letter of intent myself." "I see," Victoria said, leaning back in her chair. "James, What is the protocol for accessing the private valuation matrix? Strictly lead analyst and executive clearance, ma'am. And are you the lead analyst, James? Well, effectively, as of today, no. Victoria cut him off, her voice dropping to a glacial whisper. You are an opportunistic parasite who accessed restricted financial documents without authorization while your colleague was dealing with a life-threatening medical emergency. You prioritized brown-nosing over basic human decency. Miss Sterling, I was just trying to save the deal. James stammered, panic finally setting in. You're fired, James, Victoria stated, her tone absolute. What? You can't be serious. I brought in $10 million in revenue last quarter. I don't care if you brought in $10 billion. If you are still in the Vanguard building in exactly 30 minutes, I will have security physically throw you into the street, and I will personally see to it that you are blacklisted from every major financial firm in Manhattan. Do not ever contact David or my office again. She ended the call and tossed the phone back to David. David sat in stunned silence. You just fired your top earner. That what? I just fired a liability, Victoria corrected, looking him dead in the eye. A man who cannot show empathy when a child is dying cannot be trusted to handle the pensions and livelihoods of our clients. It's bad business. She paused, looking down at her hands. The tough CEO facade seemed to crack just a fraction. Besides, she whispered, almost to herself, I know exactly what it's like to be helpless in a room while someone you love stops breathing. David watched her, realizing there was a massive twist to the legend of Victoria Sterling. You don't have to talk about it. I was 16, Victoria said, the words spilling out as if a dam had broken. My little sister Chloe, she was 8. We were home alone while our parents were at a charity gala. She had severe asthma, just like Lily. She started wheezing, but I didn't take it seriously. I thought she was just acting up. By the time I realized how bad it was, she had turned blue. I couldn't find her inhaler. The ambulance took 20 minutes to arrive. A single tear slipped down the billionaire's cheek, catching the dim light of the hospital lounge. She wiped it away furiously. She died in the ambulance, Victoria continued, her voice trembling. Because I was careless, because I didn't act fast enough. Ever since then, I promised myself I would never be helpless again. I built an empire so I would never have to wait on anyone, ever again. So when I saw Lily on that floor, you saved her. David finished softly. Victoria, you saved my daughter today. This thing you carked. Victoria looked up at him, the heavy burden of her past mingling with the reality of the present. I hope so, David. God, I hope so. The digital clock on the sterile hospital wall clicked to 6:15 a.m. Dawn was just beginning to streak the Manhattan skyline with pale gold when the heavy lounge door swung open. Dr. Harrison Reed stepped inside, his posture relaxed and a reassuring smile on his exhausted face. David shot up from the leather chair, his heart leaping into his throat. Victoria stood up right beside him, her posture rigid with anticipation. She's awake, Dr. Reed announced softly. David let out a choked sob, his knees buckling. Victoria caught his arm, steadying him with a surprisingly strong grip. The anaphylaxis was triggered by a severe underlying respiratory infection, which caused that near-fatal airway constriction. Dr. Palm, Reed explained, checking his tablet. The immediate administration of epinephrine and the mobile oxygen unit saved her life. If you had waited for city EMS to navigate midtown traffic, Mr. Harris, she would have gone into cardiac arrest. She's weak, but she is completely out of the woods. Can I see her? David rasped, wiping his eyes. Room 422, keep it brief, she needs her rest. David sprinted down the silent corridor, Victoria trailing a respectful distance behind. He pushed open the heavy door to room 412. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was a symphony. Lily lay in the center of the bed, a small oxygen cannula resting under her nose. The terrifying blue pallor that had haunted David's nightmares all night was gone, replaced by a soft, healthy pink. "Daddy," she croaked. "I'm here, baby bird," David cried, rushing to her side. He pressed his face against her tiny hands, kissing her knuckles. "I was so scared." "I'm okay," she whispered, her heavy eyelids drooping. She looked past him toward the doorway. "Is that the nice lady?" David turned. Victoria was standing at the threshold, hesitant. The ruthless billionaire looked completely out of her element, yet undeniably moved. "Yes, sweetie," David said gently. "This is Victoria. She got the doctors to help us." Victoria approached the bed slowly, looking down at the fragile little girl. The glacier finally melted. A genuine, radiant smile broke across her face, transforming her entirely. "Hello, Lily," Victoria whispered. "Thank you for the airplane ride in the car," Lily mumbled sleepily. "It was super fast," Victoria chuckled, wiping a stray tear from her own eye. "You're very welcome. You gave us quite a scare. Promise me you'll get lots of rest." "I promise," Lily sighed, drifting back to sleep. David and Victoria quietly stepped out into the hallway. David leaned against the wall, taking a shuddering breath. The adrenaline was fading, and reality was crashing back in. "I need to get my laptop," David muttered, running a hand through his messy hair. "James is gone, but I can still salvage the Omnicorp data. If I work from the lobby, I can email the revised valuations to the board by noon." Victoria stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "David, what are you talking about?" "I have to," David pleaded, panic returning. "Victoria, I am drowning in medical debt. If I lose this commission, I lose my apartment. Lily and I will be on the street." Victoria stepped directly into his line of sight, her emerald eyes fierce. "You are not touching a laptop, and you are certainly not worrying about medical debt." She pulled out her phone. "As of 6 a.m., you are officially the Senior Director of Acquisitions, filling James Rutherford's vacancy. Your base salary has tripled." David's jaw dropped. "Victoria, you can't. I smuggled a child into a confidential merger, which highlighted a massive institutional failure in my company." Victoria countered smoothly. "I've already sent a corporate memo. Vanguard Media is opening a free, state-of-the-art childcare center on the 52nd floor. Furthermore, our health insurance is being overhauled to cover 100% of pediatric emergencies and wipe out pre-existing medical debts for senior staff." "Which you are." "Victoria." David was entirely speechless. Suddenly, Victoria's phone rang. The caller ID flashed brightly. "Richard Gable, Omnicorp CEO." David tensed. The hammer was dropping. Gable was going to pull the $3 billion deal. Victoria answered on speakerphone. "Good morning, Richard." "Victoria," the booming voice of the Titan echoed in the hallway. "Care to explain why my team was left sitting in your boardroom while your analysts sprinted out like the building was on fire?" "He had a severe family emergency, Richard," Victoria stated coldly. "I suspended the meeting to ensure a child received life-saving care." Silence hung heavily on the line. Then a low chuckle rumbled from the speaker. "I heard you fired James Rutherford," Gable said. "I did. He lacked character." "Good. I hated that slick bastard," Gable replied. "Look, Victoria, I deal with sharks all day. But knowing you'll walk away from $3 billion to save an employee's kid, that tells me who I'm doing business with. It means you don't cut and run." David gasped. "The deal stands," Gable finalized. "Have the contracts on my desk Monday." The line clicked dead. Victoria smirked, straightening her ruined blazer. "Empathy, David. It just secured us $3 billion. David smiled. In the coldest of corporate empires, a single spark of humanity had changed everything. Sometimes the coldest exteriors hide the warmest hearts, and true leadership is proven not in the boardroom, but in moments of human crisis. What did you think of Victoria's incredible transformation and her decision to prioritize a child's life over $1 billion deal?" If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.